G'day, welcome back. Last episode you saw us put together the mast so that we have our Starlink and our central nav lights and a few other things, antennas and so on there. Today, contrary to popular belief, we really want to launch Brupeg, so we're going to finish off the rest of the nav lights. On top of Brupeg, we have these boxes, one on either side. We've got one just here and then exactly the same on the other side. Basically what they are is aluminium shades. So if you look down on them vertically, you've got this area here where a nav light sits and you've got a shade at the back, and then you've got a long sort of beam with a shade at the front. Basically what they are for is when you mount the nav light in a specific location down here, we'll have to measure it out and figure out where it is. It means you don't get anything beyond 112 degrees, 112.5 backwards, and then you don't get anything beyond, dead straight at the front. So these are an important part. They're critical for our nav lights to work. We're a Kiwi couple living in Australia, and you thought this was going to be the standard intro. It's not. For this week, we thought we'd razz it up. Look, here's a photo of the boat in the water. Now it's out of the water. We popped a splash of grey on what used to be horrible blue. The inside was rusty, and we dealt with that too. This grubby freezer room got a lid built quite soon. The stars had aligned. It allowed us to buy a motor for our new Cummins Shrine. Jess put her feet up. We built an anchor to rule them all. I folded my arms in exasperation, and Jess turned her back to the sunset. Welcome to Project Brupeg. These bulbs here you can see are LED. They're about ½ an inch wide, and therefore they're a bit hard to get the angles perfect on them. Incandescent filament bulbs are much easier to get the angles right. I'm going to show you over on this side here. I've got parts everywhere, but what I want to show you, this is the angle that we need to maintain. So that's 112 degrees, 112.5 degrees. We need the bulb filament to be bang on that mark right there, which is what we've drilled for. So here's a bulb I prepared earlier. You can see that filament is literally just a straight, it's like a wire basically between the top and bottom terminals on this, inside this bulb. So when you go to line it, you can basically look straight down there, and it's like pinpoint accuracy to make sure that the line, the angles are going to maintain themselves. If you put a bulb that's got quite a big diameter, the LEDs are about 12 millimeters across, you're never going to maintain these angles perfect. So that's why incandescent bulbs are still used for navigation, because they're the only ones that you can get this bang on accuracy with. It's possible to get LED nav lights. Some smaller boats have LED nav lights, but they're also they're normally set into like a mold that holds that angle spot on. It's also possibly a case of they just don't get pulled up as much because you're not so critical if you're a tinny or a small boat, that sort of thing. I don't know, I'm guessing on that one, but basically because of the angle, that's a really critical part of navigation, and the bigger the boat, the more important that is. It's fine to get hit by a 3-meter aluminium tinny. It's not quite so fine to get hit by a 300-foot tanker. So this angelophagus is set perfectly at 112.5. What I need to do is basically get the marks in so that I can figure out exactly where I need to locate my bulb filament. The little jutting out part at the other end of this bracket is 45 mil. So let's get that marked in first. Okay. Right, so the bulb filament can't be any further in than that line. And what we need to now figure out is where the intersection is. Right. So we have our mark. Right, basically that intersection there is where our incandescent bulb filament, which is a vertical line in these nav light bulbs, has to be mounted. So it's quite tight over to the side, but it's basically tucked right in over there like that. So because this is fairly thick aluminium, it's 8mm aluminium plate that this whole frame is built out of. Rather than drill straight through it and put a bolt and a nut on, it's impossible to get your fingers underneath this. It's only sort of 3/4 an inch off the deck, and it's quite a big plate, so you just physically can't do it. I'm going to drill and tap it. So I use these here. I don't know if you can see that, but it's basically a spiral tap. It's an M5, so 5mm diameter, and then the pitch length is 0.8 millimeters. So rule of thumb with metric when you're tapping, and this is why metric is the superior measurement style, take your diameter, 5mm, minus the pitch length, so 0.8 millimeters. So theoretically you'd need a 4.2 millimeter drill to tap this out correctly. You can use a 4mm drill, given that it's alloy, it's pretty soft. This will just power through it regardless. But the beauty of using a spiral tap, versus just a regular straight shank tap is you can put it in a drill and just drill all the way through in one motion. You don't have to do the stop, start, stop, start, stop, start all the way through. because the spirals are a bit like a drill bit, they actually pull all of the swarf out and clear it out of the way, whereas the straight you know, regular taps, they don't do that. You have to do that stop start in order to not bind them up. So I love using these things. I think they're absolutely awesome. So I need to take these cables that come from the positive and negative that come from this bulb, I need to take them down through the roof without causing leaks. Previously, Brupeg had a system where they just drilled a hole into the steel roof and pretended it wasn't going to leak. They put, I think, 86 to 88 tubes of sealant on there to try and stop it. It was a fair ball of it. It didn't work, it rusted, the roof was rubbish, and I've yet to actually repair that rust. It's not dramatic, it's about sort of yay big where it tapers down to wherever the hole was. So I want to just cut that out and put a new plate in. But in the meantime, I need to come up with a decent solution to make it waterproof. So stainless cable glands. These here are a 12 by 1.5 thread on the bottom. So what I'm going to do, I've got 6 millimeters of roof thickness, so I'm going to just drill and tap into that. I don't have a lot of distance. The normal rule of thumb is if you're using, say, a 12mm bolt, you want a 12mm nut or 12mm thick of metal to basically tap into. You can get away with less. It just depends on how much torque you're putting on this bolt. In this case, we can get away with less because we're not going to be ratcheting this up to 200 foot-pounds of torque. We just need it basically sealed up and tight, so just nipped up with a spanner is enough. And we should be good. It does have an O-ring. I'm not going to rely on that. I'm going to be putting thread sealant in this, but simple solution for now, I think, is basically drill and tap this into the roof and then crank this up once we've got everything set. That's my solution anyway. Let's see if it works. This is how I solved the original leak. It's under here somewhere, and I didn't have time to fix it, and I didn't have a welder that was light enough to drag up onto the roof, so I just found a bit of scrap aluminium and just gooed the absolute cripes out of it and stuck it onto the roof. It hasn't leaked since, and I've sealed it up from the bottom, so I know I haven't stopped the rust, but I've slowed it down significantly, and eventually I'm going to just put a patch in here. It's a fairly easy job to do. It sounds dramatic even though I've got interior in the boat, but you just put a metal drum underneath it and then you can plasma down straight down and it blows all the rubbish into the drum. We've done that a few times on the boat and it's been a pretty successful way of a clean cut inside a boat with a fully fitted interior and that sort of thing. So that's something that I'll do on the water. I'm not going to bother now, but for now I do need to get this in. So I was thinking of maybe mounting it over in the corner here. Cabling is going to be coming out straight down through this hole I created. It'll come out over here and then do a bit of a lift and down into the roof. I think that's going to work. Let's go with that. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to put it there because I can see that's the weld for the edge of the cabin. We've got 120mm of insulation, so that's going to be completely in the wrong spot. Let's put it over here. All right, metric homework for my American friends. This is an M12 tap with a 1.5 thread. What size is this drill bit? Let me know in the comments. And everyone from Europe, you can be the judges of this competition. Next up I need a stern light, so I'm going to stick it up here. This is our winch arrangement. That's a retractable seat belt that I use as a safety for when Jess is going up and down in her chair. This is just a random bit of stainless that I welded on yonks ago because I had to do something with a pulley, can't even remember what it was now. That's all got to come off. This is original, so this used to be used when Brupeg was a fishing boat, but we decided to keep it because it's very handy. It's a great lifting point, it's nice and strong. So what I'm going to do today is weld on a little bracket that I'm making for a stern light. I'm going to be replacing this seat belt at the same time because that one's dead, and I'm going to do a bit of a check over of the winch and everything to make sure that it's still safe for Jess to go up and down on. Okay, the cable that I'm using is sold as 4mm square, but each conductor is 1.84mm. Left hand side of the boat, no port left, therefore we go red on the left hand side. Some goodies have just arrived in a truck. Hey, how are you? Thanks very much, hey. Final step in making this Le Nuclear. This is some 3-1 resin infused heat shrink. I put it over top of any exterior joins, that way I've got an extra layer of protection to make sure no water gets in there, and it also holds it a wee bit stiffer so there's less chafage potential. It was while feeding this cable in that a tiny little slither of rust caught my eye, and I thought, hey, we should investigate that on a steel boat. Great idea. That escalated quickly, so I pulled this off because I wasn't 100% confident about getting it through that gap without, you know, buggering it up because there's sharp edges. But under here there's rust. If I get out of the sun you can sort of see these are the bits of rust that I need to cut out. So there's a bit underneath this panel here, and there's also these bits here. I've doused them in rust kill, so I've basically bashed off as much loose rust as I can, doused it in rust kill. That is not a very good repair. However, Jess has taken a downturn in her health. I need to get the boat in the water, and I can do that in the water later on, so I'm going to repair that probably in a couple of months. It's easily going to last that long, and if it does last, the worst thing that happens is I have a slight leak up on the roof. It's not the end of the world. I could jam a pile of adhesive in there and just nuke that leak, but yeah, I need to get the boat in the water because Jess needs to be floating. Here's something I didn't plan. The bolt down in the corner there, you can see it sticking out there. I can't actually get it in and out with the light on. Alright, good. So we're going to leave it where it is. I'll take this bolt out, like so. Slide that one through there. That's how I'll soothe that, and then put that one in last. Good. Glad we come up with that order. Now the frame's bolted, it's time to start feeding the wiring down through the cable gland that we put on earlier, and then into the wheelhouse of Brupeg. This needs to be protected from UV, so I'm going to throw a bit of conduit protection on that, zip tie it on so that the conduit is the weak link, and it always protects this white non-UV protected sheathing. I'm using this black conduit to basically protect it, so I'll slide that on there. And I want to go right down over top of that connector as well. Sorry, not connector, gland. Like so. So rotate it so that the gap is on the bottom. Small bag of zip ties. Alrighty, I think that'll do it. Let's go that way. Oh, you come on. It's mounted so close to the edge. I don't actually know if I can get this on. Oh, you monster. I've made an ever so slight adjustment to the corner of that with a grinder. Because, there we go. Done. So this is super close to the edge, but I have no option. I have to mount it there because that light has to be in that exact position or else it's not going to work as a nav light. The only way I could change it to bring it further out would be to either extend this side and extend the front so that I can keep my angles correct. I can't be bothered doing that, so we're going to shave the light instead. It works perfect, it's in there, and it doesn't affect the watertight seal that's at the top of this lid anyway. This one here is going to be fitted soon, but I need to cut the cable that is on the end of that one there, because that's 12 meters of cable and I only need about 5. I need to chop it off when it's at the right length so that I can start working on this one. So let's go down, start chopping up that cable. I've had a bit of a mail run. We've got quite a lot of stuff that's arrived. This is a replacement seatbelt for Jess's winch off the back of the boat. I use that as a safety. We've got a bus bar, some bootlace lugs. These are awesome for cables if you just want to put an end of a cable straight into like a terminal like that. Bolts that go on this, which is a seat that we need to fit into the bathroom. It's a fold down seat, but we're also putting these throughout the boat, so just places where we want something tucked up against the wall where people may or may not sit. More stainless glands. We got these machined up in town. These are for the wings, putting a bigger pin in them. We had 12mm pins and I've knocked that up to 20, so these are just made out of steel. Hopefully they'll last a bit better. Some plugs for a UPS that we're using, a whole bunch more of our heat shrink terminals, a light that needs to be fitted. Got some awesome king chrome, what do you call them, Allen keys. They're large person size. Whole stack of wiring. This is some 6mm conductor that's finally arrived for our stern light, but I haven't got time to fit it in this episode. Got a bunch of these T-clamps that need to be fitted, some dielectric grease for our lights to make sure that they don't corrode out on us, and another packet of just random screws and bits and bobs. So Jess is conked out. She spends most of her days on the sofa at the moment. Yeah, I'm a little bit on the low side. For those who've been following along, this does happen. So we're getting more tests done and talking to lots of doctors at the moment and figuring out what's going on. In the meantime, poor Dame is doing everything. So before I get into wiring of these nav lights, I'll show you a couple of the jobs in the background. This is Jess's tiny little children's scooter. This is amazing for getting around the boat. It's really short, it's really skinny, and she can zoom anywhere inside the boat because wheelchairs don't easily fit around corners. But it's two-wheeled, so I need to make this thing into a trike so it doesn't fall over and put an easier seat for her. So that's one job that I'm doing. I'm going to do a full rebuild on this thing to make it actually usable. Another job I have on the go is this. It's a pair of new motors for a wheelchair, as well as the controller charger. So this thing here is the same motor that this chair runs. So we bought this recently for Jess. This is something we're paying off over time, but we didn't have a choice. She needs a chair now. So we thought best to get the same motors for her new chair as what runs on this one. The trouble with this chair is these dinky little wheels, they're no good for off-road. Given that off-road is Jess's middle name, we built this a while ago. This here is version 1 of our off-road trike. So it's got 26-inch wheels at the back, so they're 4-inch wide 26-inch wheels that go on like a snow bike or a fat bike. We've got a rally seat in there so that it holds her in really well, and then I got a little 16-inch wheel off a kid's bike, modified it up to be a caster wheel, and that was just knocked together. That's why the welds are horrific, but it was knocked together basically to see if it worked as an idea. It does. So I'm going to electrify this, but I have new metal that I'm going to build a new chair completely out of this. Instead of using 26-inch wheels, I'm going to go to 20-inch, so I've got those wheels, and they're much smaller. Hopefully I'll be able to make it slightly narrower and slightly a bit more sort of compact. It doesn't have to be as big as this, and in order to make this here work when we go in and out of say shops or tight corners, it's quite long, so the wheelbase is actually a real pain. I have a little trick, so when this build comes up you'll see what I've got in mind for that. As you can see, I've done a bit of a tidy up in the wheelhouse here because, you know, first impressions last, and I thought you might be popping over for a visit. Okay, so cable comes down through the roof over here, and I have to basically string it along the boat and get to this panel here, which we're going to start fitting out with switches, and that's going to be our little switchboard. Now, I don't want any lights in front of me when I'm sitting in the seat and we're up here at the bridge. I don't want anything bright in front of me, so absolutely zero. I have the ability to turn absolutely everything off, so absolutely no little red lights, green lights, whatever. It's all got to go. The reason being is we had a couple of ice pilots on. This is a shout out to Lars, one of our Patreons. Him and his dad and their family go up into the Arctic Circle quite often in Svalbard. One of the things that they said is you want to have the ability to black out everything on your bridge so that you can see ice. So we're having a switchboard over here that we're building, but we're going to have absolutely no indication that something is on unless the switch is on, so there's no little indicator lights. So with that in mind, I need to figure out how to get everything across to this point to where our new switch panel is going to be. With that wiring run, now it's time to start working on the starboard light. I feel like we've been here before. Right, this other light should be a piece of cake. I've got all my parts ready to go. Just have to start putting it together. Before I go and get carried away and finish a job, I thought I'd answer some of the questions that came up in the last episode. So, I do need to put a brace between here and also sideways off this VHF aerial, because this is going to take a bit of a hiding. This one not so much, because it's pretty lightweight, not very high. This one's going to have a lot of whip when we start crashing through waves and ocean and all that sort of stuff. However, there is a very slight reason why I didn't put a brace between here. Can you see that it's wider there than it is down here? When I welded it, it tipped forward. So what I want to do is give it a smack with a hammer to straighten it back up, but I couldn't do that until I bolted it down, because I couldn't actually hold the thing firm enough. So what I'm planning on doing now that it's all bolted together is hoiking it back so that I can get the two of them level. I want to get this one back to being straight up and down. Then I'm going to weld a brace between them and sideways on this one here. So that's to happen, but couldn't happen until I bolted this thing down, and I also ran out of time. I had to get this episode out. So the other thing I wanted to touch on is Starlink. I've done some very technical drawing. Look at this. So that's how much it swivels from side to side. I don't know what that is in degrees, but it's about, you know, that far. It's pretty technical so far. A couple of people have talked about weatherproofing Starlink. I don't know how weatherproof it is. One commenter said that it's already been hardened, so it should be fine out in the sort of the spray and the sea and the crap and the snow and whatever. That might be true, I don't know. A bunch of people have said that I probably need to protect it. That also might be true, I really don't know. So my plan, I'm either going to leave it as is, which is probably what I'm going to do because I run out of time on everything. So I'll leave it as is, and if it lasts, great, it's hardened. And if it doesn't last, I'll have to eventually replace it with another receiver transmitter. But at that stage, I'll probably try and build a radome for it. I'm also kind of thinking that if they release a roaming dish, this is theoretically capable of roaming, because I've seen a few people on different Facebook groups actually use them on boats and have roaming already set up, and it's this dish. So there's no special roaming dish. As far as I'm aware, that could all change because, you know, Elon. But if we do have to replace this, then it may be a case that we end up with a totally different design or whatever. So let's just wait and see. This is kind of a work in progress. All right, second light. Let's get this joined up. Hot diggity. See how that's got nice and transparent on both of them, and you can see it's like really vacuumed down and glued onto that cable. That's going to be a decent join. Now, chafe protection. I'm just going to throw a big chunk of this 3:1 resin infused heat shrink over the top of the whole thing, just like we did on the other side. Lovely. Before we can get the cable through, I need to take this off so that we can feed it through without chafing because of the sharp edges. As any annoying mechanic will tell you, a bolt isn't tight unless it's torqued, so click, click. All right. So slide that on first. Slide the little rubber thing on and start working that through. So this is the cable that comes down from that light that we've just fitted up on the wheelhouse roof. Now I need to work it around to get to the dash over on that side of the boat. It's pretty warm up here in the afternoon because we've got 15 windows here, so it's like an airport traffic control tower. It's a bit of a glass house and warms up. My low-tech solution is these little shade things that you get for your car windscreen. They're fantastic. It's like knocked 10 degrees out of this room. So anyway, that's what the shiny thing is behind me. What I was thinking of doing is basically linking this along and then running sort of down this way with the radar cable. Now, previously, in a previous episode, I've fitted all of this radar cable nice and neatly, and then I had to just unclip it immediately because I realized that I forgot something. So we're going to clip it all back up together so that it goes down that pillar of the wheelhouse neatly. I'll take this down with it as well. In fact, I just realised I've got to take all of this massive wiring down into the dash somewhere as well, so I may as well do that at the same time. This is everything from the mast down through that central pillar all the way down through the roof here and then into wherever it's going in the wheelhouse.
We've noticed that some of you are watching our show without subscribing to the channel. Clearly this is a mistake. Surely you wouldn't want to miss out on a Brupeg episode. But for this month only we have an enticement. For every new subscriber, a unicorn gets a cuddle. So jump in fast, stocks are limited. Sometimes hand tools just don't have enough grunt, so you think, you know what, I'm going to increase the horsepower. And sometimes that works out well. Sometimes, not so much.
So the switches that we're using are going to be these Nava twin pole switch. So it's just a pretty simple, just an on-off switch. They are quite robust, that's why I like using Nava stuff. They're 20 amp at 12 volt DC, so it's a relatively robust switch. I've had pretty crap results with small DC switches over the years on boats. Most of them don't go anywhere near what they're rated at. If they're rated at 15 amps and you're pulling that for more than a few seconds, they just start to crap out on you and melt down. So I always like to get the strongest possible switches that I can. There's not a huge price difference between, say, like a cheapie and something like this. I think this is like 20 bucks or 25 bucks for the top of the line one, and I think the cheapest sort of off the shelf one you get at most shops is about 9 bucks. You can get them cheaper online, but you know, why would you? They fall apart. So if you're only doing a few switches, go for the most expensive one that you can afford. That's basically the highest rating that you can in terms of amps. That's my experience in terms of getting them to last anyway. I can't remember which one is which light, so I'm going to find out manually by sticking some power into them. And in order to do the looking at the top, I have my phone here set up with this GoPro, so you can sort of see, woo, GoPro, it's showing all sorts of stuff. So my plan, point that guy at the light, and then on the phone I'll be able to see exactly which light is turning on. There's my screen, and there's power on. That just shows you how crap the resolution is. It's even worse at this end. It looks bad being shot through a GoPro. It's just as bad at this end. Right, it is a new day, and I managed to figure out that this one is the steaming light. So I don't want to deal with that one for now, so I'm going to put that aside. This is our anchor light. I can hook this up individually to a switch, so I'm going to do that now. The steaming light needs to be mixed in with the two nav lights. So we've got left and right, or port and starboard nav light, and then also we need to put the stern light in. So essentially all of them will combine into one super circuit that's going to rule them all. That's the end that we want. I'm not going to cut this back. I'm going to give myself as much length as possible because I don't know what's changing up here, and I can always alter this later if we really need to. Doesn't matter if we have extra sort of cable coiled up behind. She'll be right. Now, a couple of people have asked which way to hold these around. So whether you crimp it, you know, facing this way or facing this way. With these particular Wi-Fi crimpers, it makes absolutely zero difference. They're completely symmetrical. So I'm sure that there's some out there, ratchet crimpers like this, that have symmetrical jaws, but these don't. So, sorry, asymmetric jaws, but these are fully symmetrical. So it makes zero difference. Please note this is general advice and not to be taken as scientific fact. If you or anyone you know is affected by asymmetric jaws, please consult a doctor if pain persists. I don't want to melt this end because it's going to make it difficult to get it onto the terminal. I only want to melt this end, which does mean that a lot of heat gets directed at this cable, so you've got to be really careful not to overheat the actual cable and nuke the sheathing on the actual cable itself. This is my, what is it, anchor light. Now I need to switch on the positive only. So basically what that means, positive and negative, I need to run this negative from the light directly to my fuse block, which is located just underneath the dash over here, and I need to run one positive to one side of the switch and then a positive from the fuse block across to the other side of the switch. So essentially, in order to, so that the earth is always connected and the positive is either intermittent, it's basically on or off based on whatever position the switch is on. So a little trick that an Air Force mate of mine told me once, on a boat, you always want to try, or plane in his case, you always want to try and use ring terminals rather than fork terminals like these guys here, because these can't really come off. If the bolt comes loose, it's still basically on there and it's not going to flail a live wire around, whereas these can come loose. So sometimes you can't, obviously, you know, a bit of common sense, but every opportunity that you can, you want to try and use ring terminals on your boat. Righto, we've got our positive and our negative. There's no fuse in this at the moment, so we'll just leave that out until we're finished. We've got the cabling running along, comes around the back here and then down onto the back of the switch, and you can see I've actually heat shrunk these guys down onto the terminal, so we've got the wire is heat shrunk as well as the terminal. Woo, more parts arriving. I just had a thunk about it to figure out, is the components that I'm using, are they strong enough? So I've got a 20 amp rated switch, and I was sort of thinking maybe I'm going to get up towards the limit of that switch, and I don't want it to be basically the limiting factor and be burning stuff out. So I did a calculation of what power is going to be spinning around in these circuits. So the biggest circuit is Nav Lights. So we've got port starboard, so red and green. We've got a stern light and we've got a steaming light. They all come on together. If we're putting our Nav Lights on, we're steaming, and we're putting our steaming light on. So they all basically spin up as one big circuit. There's 3 25 watt incandescents, so that's the red, the green and the stern light, and there's one LED which is the steaming light. Probably that should be an incandescent as well. I'll probably change that, we'll see how we go. Either way, the wiring and everything is capable of handling it, so it doesn't matter if we change the bulbs out later. But what it does mean is if we use the LED, we've got a maximum of 79 watts at 13.8 volts, so that's about just under, I think it's 5.8 amps, I think it was. If we bump that up and put an incandescent into the steaming light, which is completely easy to do, you just change the bulb out, that would give us 100 watts in total. In order to get the rest of those lights wired up, I need to get the stern light hooked up. This is the bracket that the stern light bolts to. I need to make a little stainless tag for this to sit on the back of that wee A-frame on the very far end of Brupeg's rear roof. So the bracket's cleaned up, the edges are nicely sort of rounded off. There's nothing sharp or manky on them. This is actually the top of the light. Everything hangs down for probably water purposes. But I need to basically drill these 3 mounting holes out. So we'll get that on there, pop a hole through it, and then go all the way through. I'm not going to drill and tap this. I thought about drilling and tapping this, but I don't think I'll do that. Start bolting this thing together. Before I get carried away, I forgot I need to drill a hole for the wires to leave. Done. Slight change of plan, once again. I've just done the calculations. So the wire run that goes from the back of the boat, weaves its way around and gets up to where I am. In order to run that, I only have 2 amps that I need to supply. So not a lot, the light only needs to see 2 amps, it's not much. However, it is 112 feet is the round trip that the cable is. So because of the distance, which is huge, I need to run, 10 gauge, which converted into normal is 5.3 millimeters squared, which is a big conductor. I have ordered some more of this stuff, but it's not going to be here until next week. and it's too expensive to buy in town. It's much cheaper to buy online. It just takes a long time to get here, so I'm going to have to wait on that. The stern light won't be wired up this time round. I'll do everything else. So let's press on and get the wiring done for the front lights, and then we can add in the stern light as soon as that wire arrives. So our 3 lights are the right hand side green, so that's our starboard, the left hand side red, which is our port, and then we've got our central steaming light. So the 3 of those need to be tucked around here. Let's undo that, those 2 blacks can come over this way. Okay, and the reds can stay over this side. Okay, that red can stay there, and that black can go that way. Right, what we need to do now is join these up, and eventually the stern light needs to be joined into this group as well. So that will allow us to basically switch it on, and each one's getting an independent power feed. So if one light goes out, it's not a circular circuit, so if one light goes out, it doesn't matter, the rest of them will still work. A painful lesson to learn with wiring is keep everything as neat as absolutely possible. It seems OCD when you're doing it, but when it comes to repairing something later on, when you've got an absolute snake's den of wires and cables just going everywhere, it becomes impossible to solve the problem. Whereas when it's a nice neat sort of bundle, it's very easy to follow the wire right from its start all the way down to the end and correct whatever's going wrong with it.
Stroll downtown this evening when I heard music echo through the night.
This is our 12 volt panel, so we've got negative, positive coming in. This is a blue C's panel. Positives all run down here with a fused link, and then you've got your earths up the top here. So we've got our cabling running along, comes around the back, it's all zip tied up and heat shrunk up nicely. This is going to get actually cleaned up more. Ignore that pile of wiring down there, that's just to be disappeared. Let's just CGI that out. However, this is our positive bunch that's all coming up to our switches. This is actually going to be neatened up a bit more. Once we've sort of cleared away some of this stuff, we'll be able to start conduiting up a lot of this. These are going, so these are no longer needed. This is the redundant system that's changed altogether. The old gauges up here still used to be digital. A lot of people thought that the red arc gauges were an analog gauge. They're not, they're a digital gauge, but they weren't accurate when we had to run the long cable runs and split them over 2 gauges over 1 sensor. So we're making them more accurate by putting them how they're supposed to be. We actually modified it years ago. It didn't work, so we're going to be putting them back to how they're supposed to be, and that's all going. But theoretically, with a bit of power, we should be able to start seeing some lights up the top now. Moment of truth. Nothing's on fire. Let's go and see if the lights are working. Right, well, it's pretty anticlimactic, but they are working.
When I got close, my heart was pumping to the beat that was blasting through the night. And on the street, the crowd was jumping.